Hey guys, how's it going? Sam here, and today we are going to be finishing the painting, finally. And we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be working out how I finish paintings, how we know when they're done, what I do to finish them, and maybe areas that people that are just starting out tend to go wrong when they're trying to finish a painting. So let's get started. So as you can see in this painting, we are starting off where we left off last time. The piece is kind of getting there, it's almost finished really, it's just a case of bringing it to life a little bit more. It seems a bit drab. The colours are in their kind of local form, so if a book is brown, the colour is brown. If his robe is purple, it's coming across just as purple, and obviously life doesn't work that way when you're using colours. Every colour interacts with each other, so I'm going to have this kind of green glow from the bottle that is going to light up, you know, the entire figure, and it will change those local colours. So that's something we're going to be doing. As you can see now, I'm creating the smoke coming out of the bottle and taking Blizzard as an inspiration. They actually, depending on the artist, they paint it in very different ways. One of them is like this, almost like it's a solid object and it has form, and the other is more like traditional smoke where it's kind of puffy and very transparent. And I wanted to try to make it seem like a three-dimensional form, as if it has multiple sides, and that's where you can see there are multiple values to show the smoke behind the smoke in the foreground. I think it gives a believability. It can come across as a solid object, so maybe it's like a plastic lump, which is not ideal. That's not what you want, and parts of mine still, even when I finish it, still do come across a bit like that, but I think it's a good technique to definitely try. And if you're wanting to paint maybe smoke or some kind of particle effects, it's worth considering them as three-dimensional forms, because they are difficult, they're hard to work out. It's a bit like trying to paint clouds. You'll see very stylized clouds in paintings where they come across as blocky and as three-dimensional forms, which I actually really like. So that's kind of what I was going for with this. And you're going to see me pushing values back and forth. Obviously I've gone for a really bright green for this smoke, and I didn't want that bright green to be across the entire painting because that's going to draw your eye to it the most out of anything, and I still want the face to kind of read. So with the smoke I have made sure that as a leading line it leads back to the head from the bottle, so you can see it goes from the bottle around the hand to the face, so it still gives me that primary read. But if it is just one solid green colour, it is too strong and it does detract attention from the face, so you will see me darkening parts as if they're in shadow and also lowering the opacity later on in the painting. So I mentioned in my previous video about using the mixer brush, and you'll see me do that quite a lot in this piece. So anywhere that I think the brushstrokes are detracting from the overall piece, if they look a bit messy or they draw too much attention, I will use the mixer brush to smooth out a lot of the brush strokes. And with the mixer brush in Photoshop, I don't know if you've ever used it. I hadn't used it for years and years, and I've discovered it kind of recently, and it's changed the way I paint because it's so useful, because you can use any brush that you've got as the mixer brush and it adds that detail in. So imagine you're painting with traditional oil and you use another brush to blend it. Well, that brush can be anything. It can be the size you want, it can be the shape, it can have any kind of texture you want. So imagine pulling a toothbrush as an example through oil paint and how that would change how it looks. So you can get some really interesting techniques just by using the mixer brush, and I recommend using it near the end of the painting. You can use it throughout to make changes, but if you use it at the end as well to really control your brush strokes, it's something that's really useful to do in digital that is a lot harder in traditional. So the one thing you can do as well with the mixer brush is you can set it to all layers or just the layer you're on. So if the layer you're on only has highlights as an example, it will only move those highlights around. If you set it to all layers, it will interact as if the painting is a flat piece. I definitely recommend giving it a go. Give both a try. Obviously if your canvas is pretty big and you have a lot of layers, then ticking all layers for the mixer brush might really slow down your computer, depending on the size of the file and what computer you got, so bear that in mind. So you'll see me adding lots of details, and they tend to be in localized areas. So you won't really see me touch the background now because it kind of tells the story. I mean, it could be improved upon, and if I was to do it again, I probably would change the colors in it, but you don't want the viewer really looking at the background. You want it to sink away. So if you add too many details to the background, it will start fighting for the focus, which you don't want. So when I say add details across the painting, make sure you're doing it in areas where the viewer is going to be looking and what's most important. That's also worth considering if you are doing this for a client and there is a deadline. They don't want you adding loads and loads of details in the background, because what's the point? It doesn't change anything. It's going to really slow down your process. I am definitely a victim of this. I add way too much detail across a painting. I need to learn how to just keep things simple. But yeah, that's something I would definitely say is make sure if you're adding details, be very focused on why you're adding them and where you're adding them. So for me, the face and the hands are quite important. So they will gain the most amount of detail. So you'll see I add kind of cuts and blemishes on the hands and the face because that's where the viewer's going to look. And if that's the only places you add those things, the viewer will naturally think you've added them everywhere because they just won't look around. They'll see the face, they'll be drawn to the face and the hands, and they'll be like, oh, okay, it's quite a rendered painting. The rest of it can be, pretty simple, and it will still convince them that it's a detailed painting. So one thing I would say that artists, when they're first starting out and struggling to finish paintings, one, they never know when they're done, and two, they don't really know how to finalize them. I don't think it's the biggest problem for artists that are just beginning. I actually think the first 20% of a painting is the most important part, because that's when you're sorting out the value ranges, the composition, and everything else that's really important. If I stop this painting now, it still reads. So the details aren't important. But I think when artists look at other people's work that just blows their mind, these really top quality artists, often it is because of the kind of final 10% of the painting that ties it all together, that really pushes it to another level. And it's still a learning curve for me. I'm still learning this, but I've noticed I have improved over the last year or so on the final 10-20% with colour, making sure my values are correct, and adding details, which really does push your art to another level. So I kind of have a checklist of things I like to do. So at the very end of the painting, you'll see me, every painting I've ever created, I always open the image adjustments, settings, so you can adjust brightness and contrast, hue and saturation, vibrance, color balance. If you adjust each of those, you might not make any changes, but usually you will. I find I tend to, my color balance, I always adjust my color balance, and you get the choice of adjusting shadows, highlights, or like these middle tones, and it gives you so much choice about using it. Color balance for me is an amazing tool, and one that people just don't use enough. So at the end of the painting, do it, just check, you move the sliders around to see how it looks. And if it looks better, then great. I tend to, at the end of the painting, merge all the layers. So I've got one image, duplicate it, then make the changes, and then flick the layer on and off. Because color balance can adjust, obviously, brightness and contrast and vibrance. So you want to make sure that you're not going too dark. I have a tendency of, when I use the color balance, of over contrasting pieces, because when you first do it, it seems better. I don't know why, but it seems to read better. It pops more. But if you saved it out and left it, you come back to it a day later, you're like, my God, it's a bit too contrasty. And I think this piece ends up being a bit like that, actually. So that's something worth bearing in mind. Make sure when you're making these changes, you can, one, go back, so save an extra file before you do them, and two, always check them against your original piece. But remember, your eye's so used to your original piece, it might pop out and you're like, yeah, that's definitely better, but maybe give it a day or two, save them both out, and then come back a day later and have a look at them, see how they look. Maybe open them on a different computer because your monitor might not be reading them right. I have an iPad and I use that a lot because I know the screen's quite good quality, although it does tend to over contrast things. So again, use whatever you can to see how it would look, especially if you're printing. So that's one thing I'd use. Definitely recommend using those settings to make adjustments. As I mentioned at the start of the video, I spoke about colours and how I tend to use the base colour and not change them, so the purple stay purple, the gold stay gold, and I think that's something I definitely need to experiment with, is pushing colours further in a different way. One thing you notice with this piece, especially in this part that I really think pushes it on, is the head of the hands. I introduce a brown reddy tone in the shadows, and I find that's really useful and really pushes the forms out, because if you paint a portrait, if anyone's done this, then you know how many different colour variants there are in your face. So under your eyes there'll be blue tones, green tones, you'll have reds and pinks and yellows. It's not just a peach colour, your skin isn't just peach. If you ever paint a portrait just with a peach, it just looks horrendous. So just bear in mind that your face and every skin tone is never built up just of one hue. It is multiple that merge together, and that's how you start to create realism. And that's true for every object. Every object in our world, the colour's always constantly interacting. If you paint something red, or grab something in your room that you're looking at currently and see how many colours bounce off it because of light. As an example, I've got a bottle in front of me that has a liquid in it and it's really blue. If you would just paint that, you just paint it blue if you weren't thinking. But then when you look closely, you can see some red start to pop through from surrounding things on the rest of the things on the desk. You can see some greens popping through of how it's a translucent liquid. And that's what really has pushed my paintings on recently, is understanding that multiple colours can be used to make up a form. Don't just rely on the base colour. So the sky is blue, paint it blue. His clothing is purple, paint it purple. There is more to it than that, and if you just do it in those colours, everything will seem kind of fake. They won't become harmonious together in a painting, so that's worth considering. A fair amount of what I'm doing at this final stage, it's kind of sharpening objects up and making sure that other areas are still softer. So as an example, with the teeth, you'll see that I sharpen the edges of the teeth to make them pop out a bit more. And the cheeks I'll kind of soften in, so it's hard and soft edges. This is something I definitely need to improve on. I have kind of a rudimentary understanding of hard and soft edges, and I don't think about it enough. But I found a few years ago, and you find this with people, do you know when you see a painting and it looks airbrushy because they've used a soft brush for the entire piece and it just looks wrong? That's a bad example of hard and soft edges. So you've got to remember that if you want to amplify hard edges and have them recess into soft edges, so if his chin, as an example, have a really hard edge that then blends into the bit underneath the mouth, and you'll see at the end of the painting I'm kind of going around and just making sure that certain things are really crisp, especially areas that pop out, such as the hands and the silhouette of the head. You want those to be a crisp, hard line, and other things in the background can kind of disappear. They don't need to be hard edges. So all the bottles in the background, you can see they're not really hard edges. Some of them will have, but as a general rule, the things you are trying to make stand out, you're going to want some hard edges in there to kind of add a texture, I guess. So obviously this painting process is almost done now, and I wanted to work out if I could paint a painting like Blizzard, in the style of Blizzard. And it's been tough. It's a hard painting to create. I wouldn't say I struggled throughout. I actually had a pretty good process that kind of worked out what I wanted to do. There are things I would change now, because this was the first time I'd used Character Creator as an example, and I haven't created many pieces in 3D and then gone to 2D. I've always just worked in 2D, so there are things I'm always learning about that and how to improve in that area. But overall, I think it's relatively successful. Does it look like a Blizzard painting? Ish. It's not too bad. I think you could say it does. I think there are other areas where it doesn't. As an example, someone commented the other day, I'm really sorry I can't remember your name, but you said Blizzard tends to use softer forms. It tends to be more blended. And I think that's true. I think I've added too many too many details. I think I've gone a bit too complex with some of the forms. If you look at the face as an example, I've got like dimples and kind of indents where there are skin blemishes, and you don't tend to get those in Blizzard paintings because the cards are so small that won't read. So I've added information that you don't really need in a card, wouldn't be useful. And I think that's one of the main things. I think the other thing is it's just stylization. They are so cartoony in not a realistic painting style, but more realistic than the way they're drawn. And I don't draw in a way that is natural to Blizzard. It's something I definitely want to work on with more stylized pieces, but I don't currently work that way. So that's an area I definitely think I can improve. Now, I will be doing more paintings in the style of Blizzard. I might record them, but I'm not going to talk about them again because, you know, I've done it now. There's no point. I think you've learned everything I know currently about the Blizzard style. And that's it, really. I mean, let me know if you've enjoyed this video series, if it's been useful to you. I know a lot of people want to paint in the style of Blizzard, so hopefully I've given you some ideas, even if I haven't worked out fully how to do it myself. Hopefully it'll give you some ideas to think about, and if you want to create artwork in that style, things you need to consider. And let me know if there are any other styles that you want me to replicate. I thought it was a really fun exercise. I definitely want to go more into style and trying to work out what my style lends itself to, and you know, how I can improve as an artist. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. As I always say, this is a conversation. I want to get people involved. So if people have work they've done themselves that looks like Blizzard, you know, send it through to me. Message me on ArtStation. The link will be in the description. If you want to have a look at the rest of my work, or just contact me, that's probably the best place. Or, you know, drop it in a comment on the YouTube channel, and get a conversation going. I want to hear about your successes and problems, things you think I've done wrong, things that have helped you, whatever it is. I'd love to hear it. So that is it. That is the end of the series. Sorry it's taken so long. It's been a bit of a long one. I'm going to be putting out some shorter videos next, which I should get out more regularly. So if you haven't already, please subscribe if you like the content, and hit the notification bell because I don't upload that often. Currently, really not often. So if you hit the notification bell, you'll get an email letting you know when I put up a new video if you want to see it. Otherwise it just disappears into the ether. So that's it, guys. Have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video.